Hi guys, my name is Mark. Today I'm going to talk about how we clean up an OCR output. I've worked with hundreds of these kinds of files and I've published over 150 ebooks and about 30 or 40 print books. I've done this many times. This is one of the projects I'm working on with a friend. It's called The Great Saints of the Bible by Louis Albert Banks. This is assuming, I've already done the copyright research on this author and this book, and I know that the book is public domain and it can be reprinted. And so I'm gonna clean up the file today, and then after we proofread it, we're going to put it back into print. As far as I know, this book has not been in print for about 100 years. It also helps before we get started to know a little bit about how OCR works. There's some limitations in working with optical character recognition. The most basic one is that it can only do one language at a time. So if there's multiple languages in a book, it's not really going to be very helpful. So this is not good for parallel texts. There's also a limitation of which languages it can do. So for instance, I work with Arabic. OCR cannot be done on Arabic, at least on my program. But lastly, garbage in, garbage out. So if your PDF is not very good, then there's going to be problems with your OCR. If there's a page missing in the PDF, then it's going to be missing in the OCR. So you really have to double check your PDF before you get started. So this file came from Google Books. So it has a bunch of watermarks here telling you that it was digitized by Google. Google claims that it's illegal to digitize their texts, but there's been some court rulings on that. You can look into it, and they've basically said if it's a public domain book and you're looking at images of a public domain book, then those images are in the public domain. So that's just a quick note on the legality of this. First thing I do with any OCR file that I open is I fix some punctuation problems that come up. So first I type in 2 spaces and replace it with 1 space, and I just click all, and I just run this recursively until there's no double spacing left. I will also check for spaces before punctuation, so question marks, exclamation marks, semicolon, colon, and what I was doing there is just replacing there was a space before that punctuation, and I just know that that's just a result of the OCR. It doesn't belong in the text. Now there's these watermarks on Google files, so I'm going to replace that with nothing, get rid of those. And what I'm doing here is I'm triple clicking the whole paragraph, and then I Command X, Command F, Command V, paste it in there, and replace it with nothing, so it's gone. And I just look for these watermarks, and I'm just getting rid of them. Let's see what else we got. So I'm going to do a quick search for digitized. Okay, there's still some more watermarks coming up. I'm pasting each of these into the find replace bar just to see if I can get rid of a few at once. And then the other thing I do, try to get rid of some of the FLAC at the beginning and end of the file. So this is pretty readable. We don't need this. This is library information. Looks pretty good. Yeah, this looks like a pretty readable OCR output. This is definitely going to be publishable. Some things to look out for. There's a little 2 here. That's actually not a mistake from the OCR. Actually has to do with how books were printed back then. So that's actually a note to tell the bookbinder that he's switching sections. So what they would do is they would have a sheet of paper, and they would have it folded into 8 pages or 4 pages, and then they would bind those sections together. So that's just a number telling him what section he's in. So there's a lot of stuff like that you normally wouldn't notice in a print book, but the OCR picks up all of it. If there's a lot of underlining, the OCR can pick that up. That's a mistake. For this particular publisher, there's a lot of problems with lowercase e's. So I have a lot of lowercase e's that come out with hyphens or apostrophes next to them, and that just has something to do with the OCR having trouble reading just their particular font. Question marks often come out as V's, especially with a quote mark next to them. So that's just something that comes up. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and work on the formatting a little bit, and I'm going to show you some magic that I do. Something I could do I could basically turn it into a TXT file, which would strip it of all its formatting. The reason I don't do that is basically two reasons. One is the italics or emphasis in the text. When it gives a book title or the author just wanted to emphasize something, he uses italics. I don't want to get rid of that. I want that to remain in the text. I could do a find replace string like they do in Project Gutenberg. They would mark it with an underscore like that. This word right here is in italics. So if I wanted to turn it into a TXT, I could just replace all of these I's, and that's a open italics tag in RTF code, and that is a close italics tag. I could just take those and replace them with, could replace all these with underscores if I wanted to, and then probably you'd have to use a special character code. Sorry, I don't have that with me, but so you could replace those with underscores and then work with the whole thing as a TXT file. The reason that I don't do that is because two reasons. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I don't do that for two reasons. One is that the margins tell me where there's block quotes in poetry, which this author particularly quotes lots and lots of poetry. So if I find a poem like this, it's just easier for me to typeset it when I can see visually that it's poetry. Yeah, so the two reasons I don't do that are one, maintaining the italics in the original text, and two, maintaining the margins and indents on the poetry, which is a visual cue to me as I'm typesetting. So now, instead of converting this into a TXT, what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip some formatting out, and that will make this file a lot smaller and easier to work with. I click Command A, Command B, Command B. That gets rid of all the bold font. Command U, Command U. So I've gotten rid of all the bold and the underline. I'm leaving the italics again because that's part of the original text. As you saw, the bold font, a lot of it was just introduced by the OCR. The next thing is Command A, so we're highlighting the entire file here, getting rid of the kern. This has to do with character spacing, so it's just unifying the character spacing for the whole file. We also don't have any footnotes or superscript or subscript, so that is another mistake that's often introduced by the OCR, is that a whole line will be with a different baseline than the rest of the paragraph. So I just make all that default, and then I'll unify the font to Times New Roman and size 14. That looks ugly, but we're going to fix it. Go here to text spacing, and we just make all this the same. Oops. I usually put some space after paragraphs just so that I can tell the difference between a line break and a paragraph break. It really annoys me here that there's a deep right indent here, so I can make it fill my whole screen, but everything has this right indent. It's justified at right around 3 inches. So I could just take this and drag it all the way over here, but when I did that, it actually changed the margins. It made the margins the exact same, not just the right indent, but the left indent, and all the margins are now the same for the entire file. So when I changed this one, it unified them on all margin settings. So I don't want it to do that. I want to be able to see visually where the poetry is. So I'm going to hit Command Z and back out of that. Okay, now we've got different margins, looks like. So, and that is right here at in the ruler. You might not be able to see that. You might have to hit Command R to get your ruler to show up so you can see the different margin settings. See how that moves between paragraphs? So I have some magic that I do to get rid of the right indent. What I do is I open this in code format. So Command comma or TextEdit preferences. I check this box, display RTF as code, and then I have to close the file and reopen it with that setting changed. Now it gives me the code. Now I don't know much about this code. I don't usually work in this format. I have a website that will fix this problem for me. Again, this is something you can learn how to do this with an actual coding language like Python or Perl, and you could do this kind of find replace over multiple files. I'm not good enough at coding to know how to do that, so I type this code in here, and that is going to find all the right indent code. Now, it's got 1,415 matches, and then I click replace. I'm going to make this empty, so that's just getting rid of it. Now it's gone. But I do have some negative ones that I saw in the file, so I have to make this hyphen a special character, so backslash hyphen. Let's see if there's any in here. No? Oh, well, no matches. Alright, so there's no negative right indents. This is our output here. I'm going to copy paste that in here just to make sure there's no matches, so the right indent is gone. And then I paste this back in here. Command comma, uncheck that, close the file and reopen it. And it's got word wrap on for some weird reason, but it's gotten rid of the right indents. So that's the basics of how I get started. There's a lot of other problems that come up with punctuation, the main problem being smart quotes, or spacing around quotation marks. Looks like it actually came out really well in this file, so that's a huge relief. This can be a huge problem. The main thing about working with the OCR output of a book that you've digitized, you have to learn how to look for these kinds of mistakes. So I know, again, we saw this earlier. This weird italic V is actually a question mark and a quotation mark. And something about those two characters together really sets off my OCR. I just can't find it. So look for those kinds of problems. It's almost always punctuation related. Also in TextEdit, I can find a problem like this, an extra space at the beginning of a paragraph, and I can paste that into the find replace. In the find bar, I paste it exactly as it is. There's 8 of those, and then I paste it again in replace the replace bar, but I delete the space, click all. So I've gotten rid of all of those. So yeah, this is in pretty good shape. That's just the basics of what I do when I first open an OCR text.